In August 1962, a Brazilian military patrol radioed their base from the Javari Valley with a message that would be sealed in classified archives for decades. They had encountered, they insisted, a serpent large enough to swallow their dugout canoe whole. The transmission ended abruptly. When a rescue team arrived 3 days later, they found the patrol's camp intact, rations untouched, but the 6-man canoe had vanished without a trace. The official report filed that month described the object of concern in clinical terms: estimated length between 40 and 50 meters, girth approximating 2 meters at midsection, movement patterns consistent with Eunectes murinus, but proportions exceeding all documented specimens by a factor of 10. The report's language is measured almost defensive, as if the authors knew how their account would sound to superiors in Brasilia. Yet 3 different officers signed it. 7 enlisted men provided corroborating statements, and the Canoe, standard military issue with identifying serial numbers, was never recovered from waters thoroughly searched by divers. If you're interested in real reports that were buried, classified, or quietly ignored, subscribe now, because what happened next was documented and never meant to be public. The Indigenous Matsés people, who have navigated these tributaries for millennia, have names for such creatures. Yushintashá, they call them, the ancient mothers who ruled these rivers before humans learned to build boats. Tribal elders speak of serpents so vast they create whirlpools when they dive, serpents whose passage stirs mud from riverbeds deep enough to anchor trees. Western herpetologists dismiss such accounts as exaggeration, the natural inflation of oral tradition. But the Matsés maintain detailed geographical knowledge of which tributaries to avoid during certain seasons, which bends in the river mark yushintashá territory, which times of year the ancient mothers surface to shed skins as large as dwelling walls. Before that August morning in 1962, the Brazilian army had operated in the Javari Valley for 8 years without incident beyond the expected challenges: hostile encounters with uncontacted tribes, navigational difficulties, tropical disease, equipment failure. Personnel rotated through on 3-month deployments, mapping unexplored tributaries, establishing supply routes, monitoring the porous Peruvian border. The region's isolation made it ideal for training exercises. Its remoteness also meant that unusual events rarely reached official channels. The patrol in question had launched from a forward operating base on August 14th, with standard reconnaissance objectives. Sergeant Paulo Henrique da Silva commanded. His personnel file describes a decorated veteran of jungle operations, a man whose reports were noted for their precision and restraint. His radio logs from the first 3 days contain routine observations, river depth measurements, terrain notes, wildlife sightings of conventional species. On August 17th, at approximately 1400 hours, the tone shifts. Something in the water, the transcript records, size inconsistent with known fauna, requesting identification assistance. Base command requested elaboration. Da Silva's response took 7 minutes to transmit, an unusually long message for field communications. He described forward movement in the river ahead of their canoe, a disturbance creating a wake that suggested massive displacement. The patrol had initially assumed a submerged log, drifting with current. Then the log had changed direction against the flow. They followed at what Da Silva considered a safe distance. The serpent, he used that term for the first time in the 3rd transmission, moved with the sinuous efficiency characteristic of anacondas, but its wake suggested something far more substantial. When it surfaced briefly to breathe, 3 soldiers observed the head simultaneously. Their estimates varied. One claimed 3 meters in length, another said 4. All agreed the skull was broad enough that a man could stand between the eyes. The military photographs taken that afternoon are frustratingly inconclusive, shot from a moving canoe with 1960s equipment. They showed disturbances in the water, shapes that might be living or might be light reflecting off ripples. One image captures what could be scales, each segment as large as a human hand, glistening with river water. Another shows the patrol's canoe for scale reference, beside what appears to be a coiled mass, though skeptics argue it's submerged vegetation wrapped around a sandbar. What transforms this from curious encounter to classified incident occurs in Da Silva's final transmission before radio silence. His voice, according to the operator who received the message, had lost its professional composure. The serpent had submerged directly beneath their canoe. They could feel its body mass moving beneath them, the gentle rocking as tons of muscle slid past. Then it surfaced ahead, lifting its head 3 meters above the waterline, mouth opening in what Da Silva described as a yawn or threat display. The interior of the mouth, he reported, could accommodate a child's bicycle. The patrol did what training dictated, maintained distance, avoided sudden movements, documented observations. But the serpent began following their canoe. Not attacking, Da Silva stressed, following. When they increased paddling speed, it matched pace. When they stopped, it stopped, hovering in the current 50 meters behind. As twilight approached, Da Silva made the decision to establish camp on a raised bank rather than continue navigating in darkness with such company. His last message came at 1900 hours. Making camp, subject maintaining position in river. Will attempt departure at first light, all personnel unharmed. Then nothing. The rescue team that arrived August 20th found the camp precisely as described in the final transmission. Tents erected properly, supplies organized, weapons cleaned and secured. No signs of struggle or hurried departure. The soldiers' personal effects remained. Photographs, letters, the small comforts men carry into wilderness. But the 6 men and their canoe had vanished. Searches extended downriver for 15 kilometers, employing boats and aerial reconnaissance. Not a trace of the canoe's wooden hull was recovered from waters clear enough to reveal riverbeds in many sections. The incident might have remained a bizarre anomaly if not for the physical evidence the rescue team discovered on the riverbank. Deep impressions in the mud, photographed and measured, showed patterns consistent with massive lateral undulation. The tracks suggested a body thickness exceeding what any recorded anaconda has achieved. More disturbing were the marks where vegetation had been flattened in a swath 3 meters wide, leading from water to forest. Something of tremendous mass had hauled itself onto land. Local Matsés trackers, brought in to assist the search, refused to approach certain areas. Through translators, they explained that the signs matched those of yushintashá, the ancient mothers who occasionally emerge to bask on riverbanks during molting season. One elder stated that the soldiers had made the fatal error of camping within a yushintashá's claimed territory. When the ancient mothers decide a threat must be removed, he explained, they remove it completely. Canoe, weapons, men. The river provides no evidence of what it swallows. Brazilian Army policy classified the incident report immediately upon receipt. The official casualty notification listed the 6 soldiers as missing in action, lost during routine patrol operations. Da Silva's family received his personal effects and a commendation for service. The photographs and measurements were sealed. When researchers later requested access under Freedom of Information protocols, they found the file had been lost due to archive reorganization in the 1970s, a common fate for documents officials would prefer forgotten. But the report had been copied. Junior officers who found the story compelling made duplicates before the file disappeared. These copies circulated quietly among military personnel stationed in Amazonian regions, passed along with warnings about the Javari Valley's particular hazards. By the 1980s, portions had leaked to civilian researchers studying cryptozoological accounts. The full report became available in 2019 when an anonymous source uploaded scanned pages to an academic database. The scientific community's response has been predictably skeptical. Dr. Helena Vieira, a herpetologist at the Universidade de São Paulo, points out that the largest confirmed anaconda measured 8.45 meters. Impressive, but nowhere near the 40-meter estimates from Da Silva's patrol. Anacondas of such proportions would require prey bases that simply don't exist in their ecosystems. The metabolic demands of a 50-meter serpent would be astronomical. It would need to consume prey massing several hundred kilograms weekly, leaving evidence of such predation across entire river systems. Yet Vieira admits that the Amazon continues to surprise researchers. In 2002, fishermen captured an anaconda measuring 9.2 meters near Manaus, exceeding previous records. In 2018, environmental surveys documented an anaconda den containing 47 individuals in a single location, suggesting population densities far higher than models predicted. The discovery of the northern green anaconda as a distinct species in 2024 proved that major taxonomic gaps remained in anaconda classification. If a separate species evaded scientific recognition until the 21st century, what else might inhabit regions where researchers seldom venture? The Javari Valley remains among South America's most isolated regions. Nearly the size of Austria, it contains uncontacted indigenous peoples who have violently rejected outside presence, making biological surveys dangerous and incomplete. Satellite imagery shows the river systems, but canopy density prevents observation of what moves beneath. The Brazilian government restricts access to protect indigenous populations, creating a vast reserve where megafauna could theoretically persist undetected. Other accounts from the region support the possibility of exceptional serpent sizes. In 1948, a British petroleum surveyor claimed his team observed an anaconda estimated at 15 meters, basking on a riverbank before sliding into water. The surveyor's report included measurements taken from the trees the serpent had been coiled around, allowing mathematical calculations of its length. Colleagues vouched for his credibility, but without photographic evidence, the account remained anecdotal. In 1959, 3 years before the military incident, a Catholic missionary named Father Victor Hines recorded in his diary an encounter near the Javari River's headwaters. His entry describes a serpent that pursued the dugout canoe, carrying him and 2 Matsé guides. Hines estimated its visible length at 20 meters, though he acknowledged only a portion broke surface. The Matsé guides told him they'd entered forbidden waters and must make offerings to appease the yushintashá. Hines, trained in European rationalism, wrote that he'd never believed the indigenous stories until that afternoon. His mission reports were archived in São Paulo and only recently digitized. The folklore surrounding supersized anacondas permeates Amazonian culture. The term sucuri gigante, giant anaconda, appears in stories from Peru to French Guiana. These accounts share common elements: serpents capable of capsizing boats, serpents that create permanent pools where they reside, serpents feared even by jaguars. Anthropologists typically interpret such tales as exaggeration serving social functions, teaching children river safety, establishing territorial boundaries, explaining disappearances in dangerous waters. But some researchers suggest alternative interpretations. Dr. Marco Santos, who studies indigenous ecological knowledge in Amazonian societies, argues that tribal peoples possess observational data spanning generations, encoding accurate information about rare events that scientists spending weeks or months in the field might never witness. When Matsés elders describe yushintashá behavior, molting cycles, territorial ranges, seasonal movements, their accounts demonstrate sophisticated understanding of anaconda biology. If their size estimates prove accurate as consistently as their behavioral observations, Santos suggests dismissing their testimony about exceptional specimens may be premature. The biomechanical constraints on giant anacondas present genuine puzzles. Anacondas are constrained by the square-cube law. As body length increases linearly, mass increases cubically, creating structural challenges. A 50-meter anaconda would possess such tremendous mass that terrestrial movement might prove impossible. Yet the creature described in the 1962 report was aquatic, never observed moving on land, except perhaps the brief excursion that left riverbank tracks. Water buoyancy eliminates many structural constraints. Whales achieve enormous sizes precisely because aquatic environments support masses that would collapse under terrestrial gravity. Prey availability remains the thorniest issue. An anaconda of exceptional size would require exceptional prey. The Javari Valley's rivers contain caimans up to 5 meters long, capybaras exceeding 70 kilograms, deer that come to drink at water's edge, and tapirs that cross at shallow points. During flood season, fish populations explode, and terrestrial animals concentrate on shrinking islands of high ground, creating temporary abundance. A patient predator occupying a strategic location might intercept substantial prey with minimal energy expenditure. Anacondas are ambush hunters that can wait weeks between meals, metabolizing slowly in warm water. Some researchers speculate about ontogenetic niche shifts, the possibility that exceptionally old anacondas alter their hunting strategies and prey selection in ways that would allow continued growth. Young anacondas eat fish and birds. Adults take caimans and capybaras, but what might an anaconda exceeding 20 meters target? River dolphins have been found with puncture wounds, suggesting massive constrictor attacks. In 2007, a 6-meter anaconda was documented attacking a 2-meter caiman in the Pantanal. The serpent won. Scale that up proportionally, and a 15-meter anaconda might successfully prey on larger caimans, or even juvenile manatees in regions where their ranges overlap. The longevity question adds another dimension. Anacondas in captivity rarely survive beyond 20 years, but wild lifespans remain poorly documented. Some researchers theorize that exceptional individuals might live far longer than average, accumulating growth over decades in environments free from human interference. Crocodilians can live beyond 70 years. Giant tortoises exceed 100. If certain anaconda lineages possess unusual longevity genes, compounded by optimal environmental conditions and absence of predation, growth might continue far beyond typical parameters. The disappearance of the patrol and their canoe remains the incident's most disturbing element. Even accepting an encounter with an exceptionally large anaconda, the complete absence of remains challenges explanation. Anacondas kill by constriction, not venom. They consume prey whole, but cannot digest wood or metal. The patrol's canoe contained identification plates, metal fittings, and equipment made of materials that should have been recoverable. If the serpent attacked the canoe occupants, the vessel itself should have been found damaged but intact. One hypothesis suggests the patrol, realizing the danger, abandoned the canoe and attempted to reach safety overland, becoming lost in terrain so difficult that even experienced trackers couldn't locate them. The Amazon has swallowed countless individuals who strayed from navigable waterways, but this scenario requires explaining why the soldiers left behind weapons and supplies they'd need for overland survival. Military training emphasizes retaining essential equipment. Da Silva was an experienced officer, unlikely to lead his men into jungle without proper gear. The Matsés' explanation that the yushintashá removed the entire patrol aligns with their understanding of how these creatures protect territory. According to their accounts, the ancient mothers don't simply kill threats, They eliminate evidence of intrusion, dragging victims and their possessions into deep river channels or underwater cave systems where decomposition leaves no trace. While this seems fantastical to Western thinking, indigenous peoples possess detailed knowledge of river topography, including underwater features that aren't visible to casual observation. If deep channels or submerged caves exist in the patrol's last known location, they might provide hiding places for both predator and evidence. Subsequent incidents in the Javari Valley add context without providing clarity. In 1974, a rubber tappers camp reported a canoe found crushed on the riverbank, splinters suggesting immense compressive force. No bodies were recovered. In 1983, an anthropological expedition photographed tracks in riverside mud that their indigenous guides identified as yushintashá markings, though the researchers couldn't confirm the identification. In 1991, loggers working illegally in the reserve claimed a serpent as thick as a barrel had capsized their supply boat, drowning 2 men. These accounts share the pattern of incomplete evidence, enough to disturb, insufficient to prove. The Brazilian military's reluctance to discuss the 1962 incident reflects institutional embarrassment more than cover-up. Admitting that a trained patrol vanished after encountering an unidentified creature invites mockery and questions about operational competence. Easier to classify the report, list the personnel as casualties of the jungle's ordinary hazards, and move forward. The Javari Valley claimed soldiers through disease, accident, and hostile encounters regularly during that era. 6 more missing men, from an institutional perspective, were tragic but not unprecedented. Yet the report's internal consistency troubles even skeptics. The progression of radio transmissions shows escalating concern without hysteria. Da Silva's descriptions use measured language and precise terminology. The physical measurements and observations from 7 different soldiers align without suggesting coordination or fabrication. Hoaxes typically involve simpler narratives and fewer corroborating witnesses. Creating a false report of this complexity would require conspiracy among multiple personnel, conspiracy that remained perfectly secret for decades until document leaks. The photographs, though inconclusive, haven't been dismissed as forgeries. Image analysis confirms they were taken with period-appropriate cameras on film stock, consistent with 1960s military issue. The patterns in water disturbance match hydraulic models of massive submerged movement. While this doesn't prove the subject's identity, it confirms something substantial was present in the water. Skeptics argue the patrol may have misidentified a fallen tree being moved by current, compounding error upon error until they convinced themselves they'd seen a monster. But trained soldiers should recognize logs, however large, and Da Silva's final transmission describing the head emerging from water requires more elaborate explanation. Indigenous protection of traditional knowledge complicates verification. The Matsés and other Javari Valley peoples have endured centuries of exploitation by outsiders seeking resources, land, and labor. They learned to guard their sacred sites and ecological knowledge from those who would misuse it. When researchers ask about yushintashá, elders often provide evasive answers or redirect conversation. The secrets of the ancient mothers belong to those who respect the forest, not to visitors with notebooks and cameras. This cultural boundary means that even well-intentioned scientists may never access the full depth of indigenous observations about exceptional anacondas. Climate and environmental changes add urgency to the investigation. Deforestation increasingly fragments anaconda habitat. Agricultural expansion and dam construction alter river systems where these predators hunt. If super-sized anacondas exist, they occupy territories vast enough to require unbroken stretches of river and forest, precisely the areas most threatened by development. The window for confirming or refuting their existence may be closing as the Amazon's most remote regions become increasingly accessible and disturbed. Modern technology offers new investigation possibilities. Environmental DNA sampling can detect species presence from water samples, identifying creatures by genetic material they shed. Acoustic monitoring can record underwater sounds and movements that might reveal large animals in river systems. Drone surveys with thermal imaging can detect heat signatures invisible to standard observation. Yet deploying such technology in the Javari Valley requires permissions rarely granted, and the region's size means even comprehensive surveys would sample only tiny fractions of potential habitat. The most compelling recent evidence comes not from direct observation, but from ecological inference. In 2021, researchers studying caiman populations in remote tributaries documented predation patterns suggesting the presence of constrictors larger than any previously recorded. Caimans exceeding 4 meters were found dead with injuries consistent with anaconda attacks, but the force required to kill such large reptiles implies attackers of exceptional size. The kills were clean, professional, the work of experienced predators, not young serpents attempting prey beyond their capacity. Some caiman showed crushing damage that biomechanical analysis suggested required constrictors in the 12 to 15 meter range. These specimens exist at the absolute upper limit of accepted anaconda sizes, but they validate that extraordinary individuals do occur. The question shifts then from whether large anacondas exist to how large they might grow under ideal circumstances. Science confirms 9-meter specimens. Credible reports suggest 12 to 15 meters in remote locations. The gap between 15 meters and the 40 to 50 meter estimates from the 1962 report remains vast, a difference between exceptional and impossible. Yet the Amazon specializes in exceptions. Its rivers contain arapaima fish, exceeding 3 meters and 200 kilograms, sizes once dismissed as folk tales. Its trees include specimens over 80 meters tall, taller than scientists believed possible before measurement technology improved. The rainforest operates at scales that strain human comprehension. Perhaps the truth lies not in single colossal serpents, but in perception errors compounded by fear and unfamiliar environments. A 15-meter anaconda, glimpsed partially in murky water by stressed soldiers, might appear far larger. Adrenaline affects time perception and size estimation. Distance over water proves difficult to judge accurately. The patrol might have encountered a genuinely impressive specimen, perhaps the largest anaconda alive, and understandably overestimated its proportions under frightening circumstances. Yet this explanation struggles with the tracks measured by the rescue team. Impressions in mud don't lie as readily as memory. The recorded measurements indicated body thickness exceeding conventional anaconda dimensions by substantial margins. Unless the rescue team also fell victim to misperception or embellishment, physical evidence supported the patrol's extraordinary claims. The canoe's disappearance remains the central mystery. Wood floats. Metal equipment doesn't dissolve. 6 men don't vanish without trace in waters that were searched thoroughly. The Amazon's currents can transport debris considerable distances, but the search extended far downstream and employed aerial reconnaissance that should have spotted a capsized canoe. The simplest explanation, that the patrol abandoned the canoe and perished in the jungle, requires accepting that experienced soldiers made fatally poor decisions despite radio access to base command that could have coordinated rescue. Some researchers suggest the patrol's fate and the serpent encounter may be unrelated. The Amazon offers countless ways to die: disease, injury, hostile wildlife, treacherous terrain, toxic plants, hostile indigenous groups protecting territory. Perhaps the soldiers encountered a large but not unprecedented anaconda, radioed their observations. then suffered an unrelated misfortune that erased their presence. Coincidence makes unsatisfying explanation, but the Amazon specializes in multiple simultaneous dangers. The Matsés perspective offers a different framework entirely. To them, the yushintashá are not simply large animals but beings of spiritual significance, creatures that bridge the physical and supernatural realms. The ancient mothers are guardians, not mere predators. They remove those who disrespect sacred spaces, not through malice, but through enforcement of natural law. From this viewpoint, the patrol's disappearance makes perfect sense. They violated territorial boundaries, failed to make appropriate offerings, and paid the price that the forest exacts from intruders. Evidence wasn't left because the yushintashá don't attack messily. They remove problems completely. Western science struggles with such interpretations, seeking mechanical explanations rooted in measurable phenomena. But the Amazon has always existed at the intersection of the explainable and the mysterious. Its vastness creates spaces where standard rules seem negotiable, where the impossible becomes merely improbable. Creatures thought extinct persist in pockets of old-growth forest. Species unknown to science emerge from tributaries never fully surveyed. Rivers hide depths and currents that defy the models predicting them. The 1962 incident has inspired numerous expeditions seeking proof of supersized anacondas. In 1998, a team of cryptozoologists spent 6 weeks in the Javari Valley documenting several large anacondas, but none exceeding 10 meters. In 2003, a documentary crew interviewed Matsés elders about yushintashá, but were denied access to locations where the ancient mothers reportedly dwell. In 2015, a Brazilian herpetologist attempted to replicate the patrol's route using archived maps, but abandoned the effort after equipment failures and navigation difficulties made the journey too dangerous. These expeditions highlight the core challenge. The Javari Valley spans nearly 85,000 square kilometers of terrain, where rivers shift course seasonally, where canopy prevents satellite mapping of ground features, where indigenous peoples restrict access to protect both their territory and the outsiders who don't understand local dangers. Searching such vastness for creatures that spend most of their lives submerged or concealed becomes needle-in-haystack work, except the haystack is the size of Austria, and the needle is a 15 to 50-meter serpent camouflaged by millions of years of evolution. If exceptional anacondas exist, they likely represent tiny populations occupying specific ecological niches. Such creatures would be old, decades old, having survived countless challenges to reach exceptional size. They would be solitary, avoiding competition with other predators. They would occupy territories, providing reliable prey access and deep water for concealment. They would be, in effect, apex predators so rare and specialized that human-serpent encounters would occur at intervals measured in years or decades. Just frequent enough to sustain legends, too infrequent to provide consistent documentation. The military report from 1962 sits in that uncomfortable space between verified and verifiable. Its existence is confirmed. Multiple copies have been authenticated. Its contents are internally consistent and corroborated by multiple witnesses. Physical evidence supported the claims made, yet the central claim, an anaconda of unprecedented proportions, stretches credibility to the breaking point. Accepting the report means accepting that science has missed or dismissed creatures whose existence would rewrite herpetological understanding. Rejecting it means explaining why trained military personnel and indigenous guides with centuries of ecological knowledge all reported the same impossibility. Perhaps that's the lesson the Amazon teaches best. Certainty is a luxury the rainforest doesn't grant. The jungle operates on scales of time and space that dwarf human comprehension. What seems impossible becomes merely improbable across the vast stage the Amazon provides. What science hasn't yet documented becomes not non-existent but undiscovered. the serpent that swallowed a canoe, whether literal truth, perceptual error, or indigenous wisdom encoded in metaphor, swims somewhere in the space between what we know and what the forest knows, in waters too deep for easy answers. The Brazilian military never sent another patrol to that specific section of the Javari Valley. Official reasons cited: improved satellite mapping that made ground reconnaissance unnecessary. Unofficial accounts suggest institutional memory of the incident created quiet policy, avoiding the area unless absolutely essential. The river bend where Da Silva made his last transmission appears on no official maps under any special designation, but among personnel who've served in Amazonian deployments, it has a reputation. A place where the usual rules don't quite apply. A place where what the water hides might be better left undisturbed. The Matsés continue to navigate the same rivers their ancestors have traveled for generations, moving through territories where outsiders see only undifferentiated jungle and water. They know which bends to avoid during molting season, which deep pools to respect, which offerings to make before crossing certain tributaries. Their knowledge survives not in written reports that can be classified or lost, but in the living transmission of understanding from elder to youth, in the stories that teach survival and respect, in the names they give to places that mark where the ancient mothers dwell. For the 6 soldiers who vanished that August week in 1962, no memorial exists beyond names engraved on a brass plaque in a military chapel in Manaus. Their families received the standard notification, the flag-draped coffins containing nothing but ceremony and grief. Official history records them as casualties of the Amazon's ordinary hazards: the disease, the heat, the rivers that can drown as easily as nourish. Their story survives in classified documents, declassified by time and neglect, in the copies that circulated among those who knew the jungle keeps secrets that paperwork can't quite contain. The Javari Valley flows on, its waters carrying secrets that neither rise to surface nor settle to bottom, but exist in the murky spaces between. The rivers connect to other rivers, braiding into networks so complex that mapping them completely remains impossible with current technology. Somewhere in that liquid labyrinth, in depths that shelter creatures unseen since the continents split apart, the possibility persists. The anaconda that measured 15 meters, or 20, or more. The ancient mother who has survived decades in territories humans rarely penetrate. The serpent whose passage creates wakes that fishermen learn to recognize and avoid. Science demands repeatability, controlled observation, physical specimens, and measurements verified by multiple methodologists. The Amazon offers none of these on demand. It provides instead glimpses and fragments, stories and scars, evidence that vanishes before documentation can capture it completely. The forest's testimony comes in indigenous voices, speaking truths that don't translate to journal articles. The water's proof appears as tracks that rain erases overnight, as damaged equipment that tells partial stories, as missing patrols whose fate the jungle absorbs without explanation. Perhaps the yushintashá exists. Perhaps Sergeant Da Silva and his 5 soldiers encountered something that shouldn't be possible according to biology textbooks written by people who've never spent months navigating tributaries where the canopy blocks even satellite observation. Perhaps the creatures that indigenous peoples have named and respected for centuries persist in the places where mapmakers write insufficient data and researchers mark survey incomplete. Perhaps the Amazon's greatest gift is maintaining mysteries that resist easy resolution, spaces where the boundaries of the known remain delightfully, terrifyingly uncertain. The military report sits in archives now, accessible to anyone with internet connection and curiosity. Its pages and photographs preserved in digital form that will outlast the original documents slowly decomposing in humidity-controlled storage. Its contents have been analyzed by cryptozoologists seeking proof of the impossible, by skeptics seeking flaws in the narrative, by indigenous advocates pointing out that tribal knowledge has been reporting such creatures for centuries, while outsiders demanded scientific validation. The interpretations vary, the mystery endures. Somewhere in the Javari Valley, rivers continue their patient work of shaping the land, cutting new channels, abandoning old ones, creating and destroying the landscapes through which creatures swim and hunt and grow. The water holds what the water holds. The ancient mothers rest in depths no diver has explored, in pools connected by channels that only they know, in territories defended for decades against intrusion. They surface when they choose, in locations they select, before witnesses they permit. They teach the lesson that the Amazon has always offered. Some questions receive answers only when the asker is ready to accept them. Some mysteries are meant to remain mysterious, not from lack of evidence, but from abundance of the unknowable. The jungle whispers its secrets to those patient enough to listen, but it speaks in languages that resist translation into the terminology of scientific papers and military reports. If you were to travel tomorrow to the Javari Valley, were to launch a canoe into those tea-colored waters and paddle into the green cathedral's deepest recesses, you might spend weeks seeing nothing but conventional wildlife, anacondas of impressive but unremarkable size, caimans, capybaras, the ordinary miracles of Amazonian abundance. Or you might, in a moment when the light strikes the water at just the right angle, glimpse something that makes you understand why indigenous peoples have names for creatures that science insists can't exist, why military patrols sometimes return with stories that authorities classify rather than investigate, why certain bends in certain rivers earn reputations among those who know better than to venture there without proper respect and proper offerings to the ancient mothers who remember when humans were still learning to build canoes small enough for such creatures to swallow whole. If the stories surrounding the Amazon's hidden wonders call to you, if you're drawn to the territories where maps fade into speculation and documented facts give way to persistent legends, join us as we explore the mysteries the rainforest guards beneath its living canopy. The ancient mothers keep their secrets well, but every generation the forest allows a few stories to escape, whispers of what swims in depths too dark for easy observation, tales of what the jungle conceals in its endless patience. Subscribe and journey with us deeper into secrets of the Amazon jungle, where every river holds possibilities and every shadow might be the truth that science hasn't yet admitted exists.